Hey, what's going on, YouTube? We got something awesome on the menu today. We are going to be discussing probably the most widely controversial topics in bodybuilding, and that is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Was he the greatest of all time? The GOAT? So sit tight and let's get into this thing. So, Arnold is a hard one to compare to. He was at the top of the game in almost every aspect of his life, let alone bodybuilding. To this day, he has the best chest in history, not to mention some of the best biceps as well. Throw in a decent back and solid posing, you have a solid package that's pretty hard to beat. But to tip the scales even further in his direction, Arnold was a juggernaut outside of the sport by bringing massive physiques to popularity in Hollywood and pulling attention to the sport. So when I think of a current bodybuilder who has done big things in the sport and outside them, also being named an ambassador of the sport, I think of Jay Cutler. Talk about a matchup. So first, we're going to go over physiques and then dive right into the impact. So let's go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and judge this thing just like most competitions would, just going through the 8 mandatories. And mind you, the pictures were scarce of Arnold hitting the mandatories, so I did decent scaling with what I could find. So let's get into the front double bicep. Now, when I look at this, you're kind of looking at 2 different ways of judging it, by the old metric and the new. The new with mass and conditioning being on top, and the old more so aesthetics. I'm going to try to do a little bit of both, but I am going to try to stay current because that's really what we're looking at now, is if Arnold would really hold up well today. So overall, Jay is just outmassing the hell out of this guy. Arnold looks amazing, no doubt. Amazing biceps, pretty decent lats. Quads are not that big, but they're definitely deeply cut and separated. But Jay, man, he just outmasses them, outconditions them, and just he's beating them on every body part except maybe the biceps. But Jay has good biceps too. They're just not as good. And the chest is good, but again, not as good as Arnold's. But overall, I'd give the pose to Jay. The front lat spread. Look, man, Arnold's chest looks amazing. It looks better than Jay's. Jay's is pretty thick and full too, but Arnold, nobody's beating Arnold in the chest. Both have good V-taper. Jay's much more massive and showing much more mass up top, better taper. The funny thing is, even though Arnold had amazing aesthetics, amazing genetics for this, he had somewhat of a thicker waist, a blockier waist, which is one of the biggest flaws that you could say about Jay Cutler. So they both kind of have that same thing going there, but they also both have really broad, wide shoulders, so it kind of offsets that. So they both really look pretty good here. The biggest difference is the mass and the quads, man, and this is going to be a reoccurring issue for Arnold. He just don't have the legs to stand up by current bodybuilding metrics. It's, again, good separation. He looks aesthetic, but outmassed, outclassed, So, again, I'd give the pose to Jay. And next we have the side chest. And, with Arnold, I struggled to find good pictures, especially competition pictures, but just any good pictures where it was like a full body mandatory pose. It was always some kind of variation or a twisting pose or just where you just didn't see his legs at all. But either way, this is good enough. This is one pose where if the legs were included, I'd have to give it to Jay. But just because, this competition is going a specific direction here, and Arnold does have the best chest in history and amazing arms as well, we're going to go ahead and give this to Arnold just to kind of try to even it up a little bit here. But Jay looks phenomenal here. Actually, I think Jay's underrated in the side chest, man. Especially in like 09, super conditioned. The side quads and hamstring look amazing. Shoulders, chest, arms, everything's round, separated. But yeah, we'll just give it to Arnold to kind of keep this fair. All right, so we're going to turn these boys around. We got the back double bicep. And honestly, man, Arnold holds up pretty well here. You know, he, again, is outmassed, but man, conditioning-wise, looks pretty damn good. Pretty full developed back. Now, he don't have the widest lats, but shoulders look amazing. Arms look amazing. Good taper. Lower lat development's pretty good. Not really showing much in the hamstrings, glutes. But you know what? He got hit a lot, you know, criticized a lot for his calves. But right here, his calves look pretty damn good, man. And back then, they didn't really care so much about legs like they do now. So, but when you look over at Jay, I think it's pretty clear who's coming out on top here. I mean, Jay is full everywhere. I mean, just completely full, conditioned as hell. Hamstrings are just shredded, glutes. You know, he got criticized a lot for having wrinkles in his lower back, but to me, you know, that's not a big deal. A little bit of skin wrinkling, who cares, man? You can tell the dude was diced, and he looks phenomenal here, man. He is one of the better backs in history. I don't care what anyone says. So, yeah, Jay's taking this one for sure. And the back lat spread. And, again, this is another one where I was struggling to find Arnold even hitting the mandatory. So, I was actually going to skip this one. But because this picture pretty much sums up what we need to see for the most part, I decided to include it, even if it is kind of like a half-assed comparison. But yeah, let's do it anyways. So right here, you can see that Arnold had a pretty damn thick, wide back. It's hard to see the exact width and symmetry of his back, but you could tell from the back double, it looked pretty symmetrical. Definitely looks pretty thick here. Jay definitely has more mass, obviously, in the back. It's hard to say as far as conditioning, but you'd be hard-pressed to think that these guys came in as diced as, you know, the current bodybuilders. I just don't see it. But either way, again, I have to give this to Jay, man, because the legs, man. I know that Arnold's hamstrings couldn't even touch this, let alone glutes. And when you look at just sheer thickness and size of the back, he can't come close. Even if he was to hit this conventionally and show more detail, which it does look pretty detailed on the left side of his lats, but that's because he's hitting it strange, you know. If he was to hit it properly, I think it'd look a little bit more like the right side. And, yeah, you know, it's hard. It's almost, I kind of want to just make this a wash because it's not really fair. So, whatever. You can make a coin toss out of it. But I would have to bet that Jay would win. And we are at the side tricep. Hey, look, we actually got a pretty decent comparison here. Damn, man, Arnold looks a lot better than I would have thought. And you know what? He almost looks pretty young here, so he might have actually developed a little bit more after this. But he did retire pretty young, though, so who knows. Shit, man, I really like Jay in the side tricep. I think he looks so damn aesthetic for a mass monster. Shredded midsection, you know, just everything just looks full and proportional, you know. Jay, to me, besides having a blocky midsection, I think I said this in a previous video, I think Jay goes down as basically the most proportional, well put together mass monster in history. I think he literally has one of the best physiques, and a lot of people think he looks blocky and you know, not aesthetic, but that comes with the territory. Look at Jay when he was younger. He was super aesthetic. You want to be 280 pounds on stage, it's kind of hard to have a very aesthetic look. So anyways, getting back into this, man, Arnold looks phenomenal, man. His chest, his shoulders, his tricep, everything looks good. I'll go ahead and give it to Arnold, man. You know, let's try to make this a little bit more fair here. I think a judge would give this to Jay, to be clear. But Me personally, man, I like the way Arnold looks here. I'll go ahead and I'll just give it to him. Yeah. The abs and thighs. Now, Arnold, man, he just he had such a thing about, hitting his poses differently, and that's fine, man. Look, Arnold had an awesome posing. I would say much better than Jay's posing. Yeah, you know what, man? I think you'd have to go with Arnold. It's hard to judge these two because they're not very similar, but even today on a standard, like even in the Mr. Olympia, the way like William Bonac hits his abs and thighs is so different than the conventional. So, if you can compare those two, you can compare these two. And, yeah, again, if you're excluding the legs, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that Arnold would not win in an abs and thighs against Jay. I think this is one of Jay's, I don't want to say weaker poses, because he looks good here for as big as he is, but yeah, his midsection kind of skews the whole picture here. So, yeah, let's give it to Arnold. He looks good. And finally, we got the most muscular. Now, holy shit, does Arnold look good here. He holds up extremely well in this pose. In fact, I think this pose, he probably holds up the best to a current bodybuilder than any of the others. And that's probably because at his time, he was a mass monster, man. But, and I know every Arnold fan is going to hate me for this, when you look over to the right, even though the scaling is off, man, look at Jay here, dude. There is not a single flaw on this man in this pose. This pose was catered for a dude like this. He's just full. He's just popping out everywhere. And he has some of the best quads in history. Good calves on top of that. Full chest. Big ass shoulders. Huge traps. Big arms. Again, man, I'm impressed with Arnold. And I think he looks phenomenal here. I think he looks better here than he did in any other pose compared to a modern bodybuilder. But, dude, I can't in good conscience not give it to Jay. Like, Jay is just dwarfing him on size, fullness, conditioning. Yeah, man, kudos to Arnold, but Jay's taking this pose in my book. Okay, and now we come full circle to the original question after going through the 8 mandatories. Who would win in a current bodybuilding competition? I think it's pretty clear to see that Jay would win. Now, look, man, I'm a huge Arnold fan. He's one of my top favorite bodybuilders, and so is Jay. I'm just trying to look at this logically, There's so many Arnold fans that I think they hold him to such a high esteem that they kind of don't look at things logically. And this, I'm going to make a point here, okay? So, yes, I think it's clear that judges now, if you brought Arnold from his best shape and you put him on stage in the 2009 Olympia when Jay was at his best, Jay would win hands down, and that has to be, that's a fact, By today's current metrics, Jay would win. However, Arnold, it doesn't mean that Arnold can't be the greatest of all time. And this goes into what I was calling the second part, which is impact on the sport. There has never been anyone that had a bigger impact than Arnold Schwarzenegger, inside the sport and outside. This guy did so much for the sport of bodybuilding, and he went on to bring, bodybuilding physiques to the mainstream by getting involved with Hollywood. Man, he did so much that I have no problem saying that Arnold is the greatest of all time. Now, Ronnie Coleman probably goes down as the GOAT as far as unbeatable physiques. And Jay is up there as well. And, of course, Phil Heath is up there as well. Lee Haney, Dorian, and Arnold. It's hard to take somebody out of their era and compare them to somebody 20, 30 years apart in their prime. Like, it's just, they were prepping for different looks. Okay, back in the day, it was more of a Y frame. Now, it's an X frame. So, of course, if a guy didn't really push hard on the PEDs and they weren't trying to get up to 300 pounds in the off season, they're not going to compare to someone who does. So I think the main question comes down to this. I believe that about 99% of the populace would look at these two and say, I would rather look like Arnold. Arnold's physique holds up extremely well. He had several standout features, and the impact that he left in the sport and outside of the sport is legendary. So I am totally fine with saying that Arnold is the greatest of all time. This is Jake. I'll see you guys next time.